The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session, our 16th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This and all subsequent sessions will be available on makara.us under the subheading MF, which is Moria Federation Webinars. Okay, let's catch up with HPB and Colonel Olcott. They've left Meerut, where they were during our last session, to revisit their old friend and author A.P. Sennett, whose home is in the northern Indian mountain town of Shimla, or Shimla. We pick up their story as they prepare for a picnic outing with some friends. Could we get a reader for this? Actually, we need two readers, one for this and one for the next page. We could go ahead and maybe assign two readers.
Okay, Carrie, can you read this first one for us? And Michael, Stacy, can you read the second one for us? If I unmute you.
A party of 6 of us. You hear me?
There we go, yes. And Michael, are you there? Stacy?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, go ahead, please, Carrie.
A party of 6 of us, 3 ladies and 3 gentlemen, were leaving the house for a valley some distance from town, where we meant to find a suitable place for our purpose. The Sinnott's butler had packed the hampers and put in half a dozen cups and saucers of a peculiar pattern, one for each of us. Just as we were starting, another gentleman rode up and was invited to join our party. The servants went on ahead with the hampers, and we leisurely followed in single file down the sinuous and rocky path which led to the valley. After a somewhat long jaunt, we came to a flat space on the comb of a ridge covered with green turf and overshadowed by great trees. Having decided to camp there, we dismounted and flung ourselves upon the grass, while the servants laid the tablecloth upon the ground and arranged the provisions. They built a fire to boil the kettle for tea, and presently the butler came to Mrs. Sinnott with an anxious face, telling her that there was no cup and saucer for the sahib who had joined us at the last moment. I heard her say in a vexed tone, "It was very stupid of you not to put in another cup and saucer when you knew that that other gentleman would have to have tea." Turning to us, she laughingly said, "2 of you good people must drink out of the same cup, it seems." I remarked that once in a similar quandary, we had settled the affair by giving the cup to one person and the saucer to the other. Thereupon, one of the company jokingly said to HPB, "Now, madam, here is a chance for you to do a bit of useful magic."
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Okay, Michael.
We all laughed at the absurdity of the idea, but when HPB seemed ready to accept the suggestion in sober earnest, there was an outcry of pleasure, and she was asked to forthwith do the phenomenon. Those who were lying on the grass rose and gathered near her. She said that if she was really to do this, she must have the help of her friend Major Blank. He being more than willing, she requested him to take something to dig with, and so, snatching up a table knife, he followed her about. She looked intently over the ground, presenting the face of her great scarring towards one spot after another, and finally said, "Please dig here." The gentleman plied his knife point vigorously and found that beneath the grass, the ground was filled with a network of fine roots of the adjacent trees. These he cut and pulled out until presently, brushing away the loose soil, a white object was uncovered. It proved to be a teacup embedded in the ground, and on being taken out was found to be of the identical pattern of the other 6. Imagine the exclamations of surprise and the excitement of our little group. HPB told the gentleman to continue his digging in the same place. And after cutting away a root as thick as my little finger, he excavated a saucer of the identical pattern desired. This capped the climax of our excitement, and the gentleman who had plied the knife was loudest in his expressions of wonder and satisfaction. To complete this part of my narrative, I will state that Mrs. Sinnott and I, reaching the house first on the return of our party, went straight to the butler's pantry and found the 3 other cups of the 9 which she had left of the original dozen, put away on an upper shelf with their handles broken and otherwise dilapidated. The 7th cup produced at the picnic had, therefore, not formed part of her broken set.
Thank you, Michael. One correction, she presented the face of her great seal ring. That word is broken in 2, and towards one spot after another. I think that's germane to the story. But yes, another story of phenomenon that she was known for. This is one of my favorites. Okay. We finished last month's webinar with HPB's commentary on the last verse of the first stanza of Dzyan. You may remember that this 9th verse is framed as a question linked to verse 8. So we'll pick up there. Can we get a reader just to read these 2 verses and catch a sense of their connection? And then we'll dive into verse 9.
Anne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
We're not hearing you, Anne.
Yeah, she was
Are you
muted
there?
again. She was muted again.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay,
Um,
can you?
Throughout that all presence which is sensed by
Just hang on. Start at the beginning because you were muted during.
Okay. Alone the one form of existence stretched boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated unconscious in universal space. Throughout that all presence which is sensed by the opened eye of the Dhamma. But where was the Dhamma? Active faculty of spirit vision, when the alaya, universal soul of the universe was in Paramatta. Supreme self-consciousness and the great wheel was Anupadaka, had yet to be self-produced, spontaneously generated.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the setup, the link. The question has been asked. And so let's have a reader for this first commentary. And we touched on this last time, but I always like to drop back a little bit. And so let's start with this first paragraph.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Here we have before us the subject of centuries of scholastic disputations. The 2 terms, alaya and paramartha, have been the causes of dividing schools and splitting the truth into more different aspects than any other mystic terms. Alaya is literally, quote, the soul of the world, unquote, or anima mundi, the oversoul of Emerson. And according to esoteric teachings, it changes periodically its nature. Alaya, though eternal and changeless in its inner essence on the planes which are unreachable by either men or cosmic gods, dhyana buddhis, alters during the active life period with respect to the lower planes, ours included. During that time, not only the Dhyani Buddhas are one with alaya in soul and essence, but even the man strong in the yoga, mystic meditation, is able to merge his soul with it, Arya Sangha, the Bhumapa school. This is not nirvana, but a condition next to it, hence the disagreement.
Any thoughts or questions about this? We briefly considered this commentary last month. Most of the statement defines alaya, which we're told is the world soul or anima mundi, and that this is changeless on the higher planes, but alters in relation to the, quote, active life period with respect to the lower planes. Any thoughts? Scott, you sound like you were clearing your throat there to say something profound.
No, my fault here. I didn't mute myself while I was drinking my tea. Sorry.
Well, that's in keeping with our opening.
Yes, with your opening tea, which was wonderful. It was a great story.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites of hers. Okay. Any other thoughts? So this idea of alaya as the oversoul is actually very similar, if not identical, with the third of DK's 3 fundamental postulates, which you'll find in the opening pages of a treatise on cosmic fire. So let's take a look at just this postulate, number 3. Could we get a reader for this? And notice, by the way, the wonderful artwork depicting this oversoul. I love that. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes, can you read that for us, please, Asha?
All souls are identical with the oversoul. The logos of the solar system is the macrocosm. Man is the microcosm. Soul is an aspect of every form of life, from a logos to an atom. This relationship between all souls and the oversoul constitutes the basis for the scientific belief in brotherhood. Brotherhood is a fact in nature, not an ideal. The law of correspondences will explain the details of this relationship. This law of correspondence, or of analogy, the interpretive law of the system, and explains God to man. Just as God is the macrocosm for all the kingdoms in nature, so man is the macrocosm for all the subhuman kingdoms. The goal for the evolution of the atom is self-consciousness as exemplified in the human kingdom. The goal for the evolution of the atom is self-consciousness as exemplified in the human kingdom. The goal for the evolution of man is group consciousness as exemplified by planetary logos. The goal for the planetary logos is God consciousness as exemplified by the solar logos. The solar logos is the sum total of all the states of consciousness within the solar system. This is a great explanation. It's so good.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, you can see the connection with this, the idea of alaya as the oversoul. So any thoughts or questions? So the idea of alaya as both changeless and ever-changing is revealed when we compare the first and last statements of this third postulate. 3, all souls are identical with the oversoul. And the 7th point on that, the solar logos is the sum total of all the states of consciousness that make up the solar system, or within the solar system, excuse me. So though the myriad states of consciousness that make up the solar logos are ever changing, the fact of their unity with the one life, which patterns and conditions them all, remains unchanged. I also find number 3 particularly interesting. This relationship between all souls and the oversoul constitutes the basis for the scientific belief in brotherhood. Brotherhood is, in fact, in nature, not an ideal. this brings this lofty cosmic postulate, right, right down into our daily lives. Quote, the basis for the scientific belief in brotherhood. Now that's occult science. So any thoughts about any of these ideas? Thoughts or questions? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Francis has his hand up, so please go ahead, Francis.
Just curious if these steps are sequential from the bottom up. They must follow these 7 steps starting at the bottom. Or if each can progress on its own, how that might play to the whole.
Well, they represent, different synthetic groups. I find it particularly interesting that the planetary logos is to the solar logos, as for instance the atom of consciousness is. The single atom is to the human kingdom. It shows this this tremendous move from the kingdom of souls and to the level of the planetary logos, and then yet again another great gulf to the level of the solar logos. But you could start with number 6 and move downwards, and it's definitely progressive and inclusive in that sense, and represents a continuous stage. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Do you have any other thoughts? Okay, good.
Francis.
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, just a thought. Now, did you say that the planetary logos, aplanetary logos, is to the solar logos as an atom? Do we mean that by an atom of matter, or what kind of atom do we mean?
Well,
is to man?
Because, read number 6, and then the first part, the first sentence in number 6, and then for instance, the third sentence in number 6.
It's just a question of scale, because I do believe that this is correct in number 6, that the goal of the atom, which is, what can we call it, like everything else, an emanation of the one, has for a temporary goal anyway the state of the human kingdom. But now in terms of scale, when I think of this, every one of the planetary logoi is like is in fact a chakra within the solar logos. You see what I'm getting at in terms of scale?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you know what I mean? An atom of substance, of course, he uses the term atom in a lot of different ways, doesn't he? So man is an atom, and a planetary thing is an atom, and the solar logos an atom, and all that. But there's a much somehow greater distance between an atom of substance and man, the macrocosm, than there is between a planetary logos, one of which is almost a solar logos, namely Jupiter, and the solar god. It's just sometimes the question of, with analogies, the question of how accurate exactly they are, and what about the scale?
Right. And I don't think that's actually. Thank you, Michael, because I think what he's really indicating here is the nature of what is to be gained, rather than describing 3 combinations as being equal in their scope. Because in the first one, he says, the evolution of the atom is self-consciousness, So the goal is self-consciousness. That's what he's saying. And that is exemplified in the human kingdom. That's why you could say that is one unit, right? And then the goal of the evolution of man is group consciousness. And that's exemplified by the planetary logos. So you probably would be correct in saying that a planetary logos exemplifies group consciousness just as a human being exemplifies self-consciousness, you know. But that's not linking their scale. And then finally, God consciousness, right?
Whatever that is, really.
Being the goal of the planetary logos, and is exemplified by the solar logos. So there's three paths that he's, you know, interlinking. Yeah,
3 levels. Well, you know, one of the things that's really interesting to me is that when you think about solar angels, he says that they, you know, this is actually a little mysterious. DK tells us that they become planetary logoi in groups of 49. So, in other words, it takes like 49 solar angels or something of that nature to make a to make a planetary logos. And then, you know, in other words, this question of the grouping of the subsidiaries, and on the way back to God, what are the combinations which seem to resolve into a greater being, which includes all these that have grouped together?
Yes, indeed. And it's at some point, you know, there's conscious awareness of that of which you are a part. Like you could assume that these 49 angelic beings that make up, quote unquote, in some, you know, unfathomable way, the consciousness of the planetary logos are also on some level conscious of their part in that, in the whole, you know, in a way that, you know, we're not so conscious of that towards which we're striving.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder when you lose consciousness of the individual and become actually in full consciousness that into which you have been absorbed. It's a problem that I've been working on for a long time, you know, about the one and the many, and it's not going to be solved tonight. Anyway, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's an important distinction here. These three comparisons are not equal in scale, but describe the goal of each group, right? One of God consciousness, one of group consciousness, and one of self-consciousness, right? It's fascinating. Okay, so
we have a couple of other hands.
Good.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. The term brotherhood is very interesting because we typically think of it as, I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's something that we strive for. Whereas in Agni Yoga, it seems to be used as another term for the hierarchy.
Well, I think it's both. Brotherhood is certainly, like if you want to use a capital B, the brotherhood, then I think that's a word that would be descriptive of the hierarchy. But the concept, as you could call it an occult scientific principle, is larger even than our Earth hierarchy. But it's nonetheless exemplifies, you could say the hierarchy so well exemplifies the fact of the science of brotherhood that it is called the brotherhood. And by the way, for all us sisters that are with us, you understand that brother is a term used, and you could, you may consider this prejudicial, but in occult literature from time immemorial, the masculine principle is the spirit or principle, and the form aspect is described as feminine, right? It's so certainly a sisterhood is in occult terms as much a brotherhood as a brotherhood of men. You know, it's a sticking point that has a lot to do with English and the way that there is no universal generic term that describes men and women equally in this way. I think German has those words, and it probably makes these kinds of exegesis much easier. But just understand that in occult literature, brother refers to spirit, you know, which is why, for instance, DK often refers to HPB as he, certainly speaking of the spirit of the person who incarnated. So, just a side note on that.
Yes, and then the law of correspondences is talked about specifically, and then analogy. And, you know, I am trying to really wrap my head around all these laws. And there are subtle differences. They're alike, but there are subtle differences between the two.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, Francis, can I say one little thing about the masculine incarnation of our planetary logos? Sure. And the general masculine quality of that which in the solar system is called human, and the general feminine quality of that which in the solar system is called David. In other words, yeah. when dealing with devas, you might well use the term sisterhood more than brotherhood.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And I think it's interesting, you know, and we live, by the way, in a very Davic solar system, as you know. 140,000 to 60, 140 billion to 60 billion.
In terms of the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers.
Incredible.
Yeah, interesting.
So not just in terms of the form nature, but also in terms of the Davic persuasion, we could call it, you know. Okay. So,
and then Trudy has a question.
Yes, Trudy.
Please go ahead.
I was wondering whether oversoul means monad.
Well, you could you could say that the oversoul that the monad participates in the concept of the overshadowing that we normally associate with an oversoul, but that it is not the definition per se of an oversoul, which is, it's kind of like brotherhood. Oversoul is a much bigger concept. It's basically this idea that all beings are form a part of a greater being and have within itself beings of lesser evolution, right? That you form a step on a ladder at whatever level, and that concept is the functionality of the idea of an oversoul, and that also that there's a pervasive animating quality, and hence we get the term all souls are identical with the oversoul, and that there's an essential reality that animates all of existence. So that's the idea behind it, oversoul. Now the same thing applies, of course, to a monad in its specific system, you know, of monad, soul, and personality. You know, it certainly overshadows the soul, which overshadows the personality, and yet the three are one.
Yeah. So would the solar logos be a monad for this this solar system?
Let's see. See, if you break the word monad itself, it's really means the one, right? So yeah, you could say it is the God of the system. You know, the very last statement here: solar logos is the sum total of all the states of consciousness within the solar system, as a monad, probably an erroneous phrase, is the sum total of all the states of consciousness experienced by the evolving, jiva that is on the path of return.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything to add with that, Michael? I heard it.
Oh, I didn't mean to be green. I meant to be orange. Well, to my way of thinking, there is one being in all of the universe, and only one consciousness, and one monad, which is the beingness of that one being in cosmos, and everything else is a partial self-perception, if I can call that. I mean, every emanation, and you go down into multiplicity, it's a partial self-perception, but take it all back to the root, and there's only one monad in all of cosmos. That's it. And everything else is an apparency, a perception of limitation, which is not real. That's all.
Yeah. Well, apparency, has the same root as appearance. And so, all beyond the absolute, which the closest expression of the absolute during manifestation would be the nature of the first logos called Brahma, with the higher meaning of Brahma in Hindu. Would be that monad that you're describing. The absolute would be beyond that singularity of oneness, and pervades all, but is not, you could say, in manifestation ever. It just simply, it's the biggest koan of all. Which is it is the non-creating creator, and it is the non-existing beingness. The difference between what we're talking about is the difference between the one being and beingness.
Yes. It's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. That this idea, all is that monad. And then we have the teachings from DK, which talked about this almost like what I imagine is like an office, which is this dedicated being who knows no separativeness at all, and nonetheless, again, we have this. You can't close this gap through lower mind understanding, which is that there is no separativeness. They are completely identified with one another, which in itself is even an erroneous term, and yet still overshadow our process. Yes. I mean, I think you just need to ask us, fifth initiate or better.
And he wouldn't answer in words either, would he?
Hold up a rose or some other flower. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Francis.
Okay, we have another hand, but first we have a comment or a question from Laura. So let me read Laura's question. She says, first, I would like to thank you for the wonderful webinar. I must also say that I know very little, almost anything about HBB's fascinating life and extraordinary work. Until I know a bit more, I will probably make some mistakes. but I can't help finding unnecessary cutting roots of trees in order to produce a cup and satisfy people's desire for magic. Did she sometimes make magic to help poor people? I'm sorry if I sound negative or judgmental. It's not my intention. This story was beautiful, interesting, and wonderfully written, and it really transported us to the moment. As I said, I don't know much about HPB and her important work, and I am grateful for this webinar. Also, we are reading about her almost 200 years later, when society has changed quite a lot since then. All the other information offered in the webinar is fascinating, and the images are truly beautiful.
Well, first of all, welcome, and it's very glad you're here, and most of us, I think, share your fascination with this inscrutable being called HPV. You remember that also part of this story was her yelling, with it in an irate fashion at the person who didn't think to bring the seventh cup, which it's not normally how you would think of somebody, that has an evolved level of consciousness. But HPV was a paradox of unenlightened behavior and brilliant enlightened actions and thought. So I wouldn't even dream to tell you, why she chose to manifest these cups. It's one of many, many different things she did. Her purpose was to channel the teaching she did. There was quite a number of volumes that she channeled. The Secret Doctrine was her magnum opus, but it wasn't the only thing she did. And she did much, much charitable work in her life. But yes, the phenomena thing, she often talks to different saints along the way in her travels, and they disdain any kind of phenomena at all, And so she was certainly aware of the fact that the production of phenomena was considered a low siddhi, and was absolutely no indication of spirituality at all. But she did it, that's all. And for whatever inscrutable purposes. But again, thanks for being here. And our system is to read a story or two and then get down to the business of the Secret Doctrine. Okay.
We have another hand and a couple more comments. So let's go to Asha first. You're self-muted. Go ahead, Asha.
Yes, thank you. I find HPB very inspiring, the things in her character. And as per the previous commentator, I just wanted to simplify, like in kindergarten language, what Francis and Michael were discussing. So the monad is one and is creation. Beyond that is the absolute, yet the absolute pervades the monad. Is that correct? Somehow, some weird paradoxical way that we can't quite wrap our minds around?
Yeah, I don't think there's not any quite to it. We can't at all wrap our minds around. And that's the exact phrase, because we are working with mind. And most of us have a good grasp of the lower mind, and we're inviting the intuition into, to enhance our process, right? But this is all like an infinite removal from the processes that we're reading about here. In other words, so just as you said, does the absolute pervade the monad? I mean, the absolute is beyond it, but does it somehow pervade it too? Yes, it's called. You have God transcendent, which has to do with the process of evolution and the hierarchy, and you have God immanent, right, which is the God within the one life that pervades all, right? And there is nothing outside of that, no form that stands outside of God immanent, right? And so it's a process of uncovering and expanding towards what is already inherently present in your makeup or in your being, right? And that's also called beingness. Do you have any thoughts on that, Michael?
I just have maybe, because these are the questions, okay? But I just have one sentence, and I would say the absolute is the very essence of the monad. As a matter of fact, the absolute is the essence of every perceivable and every non-perceivable. The absolute, that's all there is. Actually, finally, really, that's all there is. And yet is not in the sense of some form. Anyway, that's kind of...
Yeah.
So would it be correct to say that any form of creation or manifestation is illusion? Would that be a correct statement then?
It's from the highest level, but it's not, you have to also take into account, it doesn't work to walk around and say, well, everything around me is illusion. I'm not going to interact with any of this. It's all fake. You must participate at the level that your consciousness is. But that said, ultimately and finally, it is. It's a light play into the form aspect that is initiated by, and even with those two words, you're in trouble, by the absolute, because the relationship between the absolute and existence, you could say, is an unknowable thing. But all sources suggest that there is only ultimately the absolute substanding all of manifestation, right? It's described sometimes as the thinnest of veils thrown over the absolute, and that's the final level of differentiation, you might say. I hope that helps. If it does,
Thank you. No, it's just something that I don't know. I don't know. So all the soulless logi, the Elohim, the devas, the angels, the elementals, humanity, all this is just a natural flow in cosmic evolution. It's all happening.
But it's also part of the intelligent plan. It's not just illusion, Maya, and glamour. It's not just random roadblocks put in our way in order to block us from knowing the truth at all. It's a progressive plan that allows us to move towards that final time of absorption with the one.
Right. But it shifts your perspective, even though we're in this consciousness in the world and not of it, but it somehow just shifts the perspective in a profound way.
Yeah. Well, the more shifted that becomes, the higher level of consciousness. Initiations are actually called crises.
They're called crises. Did you say crises?
Crises. Yeah. And DK calls, they're like an analogy for initiation, a crisis, right? And this is just one of the many words in English that means something more profound in theosophy. And that crisis occurs because of what you were just talking about, which is that you come to another level of unveiling that unknowable beingness, right? And it's, from our perspective, it's an infinite process of uncovering. But it's the only game in town, so.
Thank you.
Francis, can I give one sort of Ray 3 sentence?
Yeah.
Okay, but forgive me for this. Every universe is the cyclic objectification of the absolute infinitude which we are.
Mm.
I'm going to go home and ponder on that, but in other words, look, we are absolute infinity, and cyclically and forever, without beginning, without end, there's an objectification into finiteness, finitude. And every finitude, every ring past not, is, in the highest sense you were saying, an illusion. But it's a necessary cyclic illusion, and it's the only game in town, just as you said.
Yeah. Well, that idea of
sorry.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
So I was the absolute, I am the absolute, and I will be the absolute. I am absolute perfection now. I was before time, and I will be after time space goes into higher dimensions or whatever. We go into timelessness and spacelessness. I will still be the absolute. So Asher exists now, before creation and after creation.
Yeah, you can't help it. You can't help it. Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. I was going to say the same thing. That's, wow, that's, you know, okay. I can quit the webinar series now. Somebody made it. That's terrific.
I don't know if I made it, but I'm just asking. I'm playing with the idea.
You know, all these things start as concepts, but what they do is they invite the intuition. That's it. Because for this is at this, you know, this first stanza is that, you know, it talks about the highest levels, or the most inmost levels of reality. And so, you know, every effort to stretch towards any of these ideas, you know, and they're hopelessly lost just by the fact that they're put in words, is a cultivation of the intuition. That's what's really going on. You know, we start by getting some understanding on a conceptual level, but that forms the basis of something greater that then is enabled by that, the initial understanding, you know. And that's just one thing that enables that further process, you know. Well, thanks for your questions. It's very good. Really good.
Thank you. My grandson just woke up. I got to deal with this reality. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, we have several more. First off, Laura says thank you for your beautiful explanation. She appreciates it. Then Roz, she made one comment. So we are really, truly, we really are truly one. And then she says Madame Blavatsky's manifestation of the cup and saucer was not magic, but part of her reality, which tells me that this can be the norm for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all magic is the ability to make causal law, or to initiate causal law into a non-causal plane, which is the physical plane. You know, there's nothing causal on the physical plane. So if you know the laws of material reality on higher levels, well, what Christ did, you know, you can move mountains, but instead of, you know, messing up, you know, perfectly good topography, you know, making a cup and saucer appear is a little less invasive, you know, but it's the same stuff, same law, you know. So yeah.
And then Francis has a comment. You're self-muted, Francis. Go ahead.
Yes, just quickly, we're all acknowledging the mind does not serve as a coaching concept of the absolute. But the thought that came to me was the term reflection. Mm-hmm. We determined that a progressive degree of descending and ascending reflections, and the clarity of those reflections to the point where the finite absolutely reflects the absolute and then is absorbed into the one, that cycle or Manvantara, so to speak.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah. That'd be like, you know, it's, and there's always these, you know, these, what can I say, these conditional levels of completion, you know, like the seventh root race will come into a state as you described, which is the ideal for this particular globe, will have been achieved and through the demonstration of the seventh root race, and therefore it's able to go into a lesser pralaya until the next fifth globe manifests, and a whole new plan, that is to say, a new stage of the one plan, is initiated through that series of seven root races, right? And that's the tiny thing compared to the levels of cosmic cycles and becoming, even the purpose of this solar logos, for instance, by comparison. So, yeah, well said. Anyone else?
Yes. Let me see what we've got here. Antoinette says, is there a group solar angel too?
All solar angels are group solar angels. There are no separated solar angels. That's the perception generated from the separated self. So it's a question of as you move up through the subplanes, you find that the solar angel to which you are connected belongs to a group, and you could probably give me the numbers, Michael, but I think on the third subplane, it's one small group of a group of solar angels, and then as you move your consciousness to the second subplane, you find that it's actually a larger group. No, it's just the other way around, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting question because, look, we don't know the numbers really, but the solar logos itself is tended to by a massive solar angel, and that all of our lesser solar angels are an aspect of that greater being. Now just think of it, how compared to a master, a solar angel is a big deal because the solar angel is the member of the council within the sun. Okay, so that's what we're told, the solar Petri. Then what must it be for the massive solar angel that teaches the solar logos? Of what council is it a member? And all of our solar angels, as far as I understand, my latest state of understanding anyway, is that all our solar angels are aspects or inherent within that greater solar angel. It's in Cosmic Fire. I can, find it for you, whatever. But it's it's all a group phenomenon for sure.
Yeah. So it's another hierarchical. You could say branch of becoming this angelic.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm remembering now that ultimately, you start in a recognition that your solar angel is one of something like 49, and then it goes to 28, and then you're of the 7, which are the 7 ray types, and that these are quite large groups of angels. And then you move finally into the unity of all the solar angels expressing them on planet Earth at yet higher initiations. But that's just the beginning, as you're describing, since there's a solar angel that oversees the solar logos.
Imagine that. Just in Letters on Occult Meditation, it's an early book, right? But he lays it out right there on page 39, wow. and we can, see the numbers that he gives. He doesn't give it all, but he gives a lot. So it's worth looking at. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions, thoughts about this?
I think
this provoked a lot of thought.
It did, and I think we finally made it through all of the questions, and I don't see any more hands. So. Okay.
Well, then let's move back to the SD, and we'll start with. The highlight part there in the middle, if we could get a reader for this sentence.
Sure. Let me go back up to Asha and ask her if she will please read. You're self-muted. Thank you.
The number 9, that one?
It would just start in the middle. We've read, you know what? It wouldn't hurt. go ahead and reread the actual verse, and then realize that what we're discussing is the first part of this verse, where you see the A, everything before that A. So go ahead and read the verse, and then read the white highlight area.
Oh, the highlight, okay. But where was the Dhamma, wherein the Alaya of the universe, soul as the new anima mundi, was in Paramartha? A, absolute being and consciousness, which are absolute non-being and unconsciousness, and the great wheel was Anupadaka.
Okay, notice,
Thus,
I'll stop you just for a second, I'm sorry. Sometimes HPB will suddenly insert more description, and here's an example. This is the first, just when she actually starts commenting, she inserts explanations right into the verse that aren't there, you know, in the list of the verses. So it's always good to pay attention to that. You know, for instance, here she said a lie of the universe, and then that description, soul as the basis of all anima mundi, right? So that's the part we're discussing. Okay, go ahead.
Thus, while the Yogacharyas of the Mahayana school say that Maya is the personification of the voidness, and yet Alaya, Nyingpo and Sang in Tibetan, is the basis of every visible and invisible thing, and though it is eternal and immutable in its essence, it reflects itself in every object of the universe, like the moon in clear, tranquil water. Other schools dispute the statement.
Okay, so let's start by rereading the definition of Alaya. And since you're reading, go ahead and just read this statement, please.
Maya is the personification of the voidness, and yet it is also the basis of...
I'm sorry. Alaya is the person.
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go
my
ahead.
eyes are going funny.
Okay.
Alaya is the personification of the voidness, and yet it is also the basis of every visible and invisible thing. And though it is eternal and immutable in its essence, it reflects itself in every object of the universe, like the moon in clear, tranquil water.
So this, you know, this has a parallel with this idea of how the absolute affects or is present in all manifestation. You know, this would be a way of understanding that, this idea of reflecting into, right? So any thoughts or questions about this? It's a fundamental tenet of the ancient wisdom teachings, right? An occult description of God immanent and God transcendent by means of the second principle, the soul of the world. It is the cosmic version, this Alaya, is the cosmic version of DK's third postulate about the oversoul. And he confined that to, you know, our solar system. This would be the cosmic version of that. So, okay, this next section.
Okay, I have a hand, and then I have a question for Michael. Roz wanted to know the page on TCF. Was that page 39?
No, it wasn't in initiation of immanent soul.
Letters on occult meditation.
Oh, letters.
Page
yeah.
39. I'll check it out, but I think that's it. Yeah, I think so.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, and then Francis, go ahead, please.
I just to give some thought of the concept of reflection comes up again. Like the moon.
Francis, you're breaking up. I'm not hearing. Could you try again?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Just thought being the concept of reflection comes up again is in that last paragraph. You know, the reflecting on the still water, the moon reflecting on the still waters of the moon, of the pond. My thought was reflecting on the still waters of the mind.
Hmm. And what is reflected in the still waters of the mind?
The alaya is the personification.
Yeah, actually, and we'll be coming up on it. HPB makes a statement that those deep into the study of yoga participate in the alaya. So that would be another way of saying what you just said. Yeah. Thank you, Francis. Anyone else?
No, I think that's it for right now.
Okay.
Do you need to read?
No, not for this one. I had to practice this one. This next section, filled with Sanskrit terms, is a doozy. But with a little work, we'll get through it. Once in a while, it's like you hit a really dense section. Don't despair. We will get through it. Okay. The same for Paramartha. The Yogacaryas interpret the term as that which is also dependent upon other things, Paratantra. And the Madhyamikas say that Paramartha is limited to Paranishpana, or absolute perfection. I.e., in the exposition of these two truths out of four, the former believe and maintain that, on this plane at any rate, there exists only Samvrit Satya, or relative truth, and the latter teach the existence of Paramartha Satya, the absolute truth. Okay. Said more simply, the Yogacaryas, which seems to be a school that HPB has a lot of affinity with, though it's not identical to theosophy. The Yogacaryas believe the absolute being and consciousness, that absolute being and consciousness, Paramartha, can, during periods of manifestation, be dependent on and expressive of the reigning temporary conditions, whereas the Madhyamikas believe that Paramartha is only an unchanging condition of identification with the absolute. Thus, the Yogacaryas hold the view that during periods of manifestation, there exists only relative truth, whereas the Madhyamikas believe that Paramartha Satya, the absolute truth, is ever present. For me, these kinds of philosophical arguments beg the question, who within either school could possibly verify which position is correct, since the argument has to do with the relationship of monadic or even higher consciousness in relation to the absolute. It's just my personal take on this. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, let's look at the footnote, which, oops, where'd it go? Oh, okay. Hang on a sec here, folks. Okay, yeah. So you aren't alone if you find these Sanskrit and Tibetan filled statements confusing. Sanskrit is often used because we have no English equivalents. It's kind of like the Eskimos. I don't know if this is true or not. I've heard it's not actually, but we like to say it's true, that they have something like 23 words for snow. The Sanskrit has many more particular words for states of being, and our attempt to translate them is always clumsy at best, right? So we just do the best we can with it. When you find these, if you find these terms bewildering, just look past the terms to the philosophy they represent. So on one hand, we have absolute true essence or being, and those who are able to experience this state through self-analyzing reflection. And then on the other hand, we have false conception and illusion creating appearance. And all the terms that we're dealing with fall into one of those two camps. Progressively, since these terms are used throughout the SD, hopefully we'll together gradually become familiar with many of them, though not all of them. And gradually the finer points they represent. But here's a chart just describing the terms that appear in this one sentence that I just read, right? And so if we could get somebody to just read this page, and notice that the painting on the left reflects what's on the right.
Okay. Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
You're calling me?
Yes, please.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Hi, please read.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Alaya, the insoluble, the source of all beings and things. Paramartha and Paramartha Satya, true or supreme self-consciousness. The Nirvana, Paranishpana and Young group, the absolute perfection to which all existences attain at the close of a great period of activity, in brackets Manvantara.
Very good with the Sanskrit. So all of these suggest different qualities of what we might call the real, that which is expressive of spirit, right? Okay, so now this group are all about illusion or the unreal. Go ahead.
The unreal, Paratantra, that which has no existence of or by itself, but only through a dependent or causal connection. Some Friti and some Friti Satya, the holding of false conception, because the precipitant ego is involved with material energies and powers. Some Vriti hence may be called the origin of all illusion or Maya, relative truth in contrast with the absolute reality or truth. Parikalpita, that which is limitedly encompassed, that which is limited error, the fruit of illusion.
Okay, so, instead of freaking out over these long words, you can see that they fundamentally belong to one of these two groups, and they do describe some fine points, right? And we'll see that as we get back into the text. We'll start getting some delineation between these terms. Let's see what's next. I got some, yeah. So here we have the footnotes. Let's take a look at that. Can we get a reader for, let me see here. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to ask.
I was wondering whether to read it myself, but Scott is amazing with Sanskrit, so I think we should go. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, okay. The same for Paramartha. The Yogacharyas interpret the term as that which is also dependent upon other things, Paratantra. And the Madhyamikas say that Paramartha is limited to Paranishpana, or absolute perfection, i.e., in the exposition of these two truths out of four, the former believe and maintain that on this plane, at any rate, there exists only some Vita Satya, or relative truth, and the latter teach the existence of Paramartha Satya, the absolute truth.
Oh, we just read that, but it doesn't hurt to have reread it. I got One of my ducks got out of the row of ducks it was supposed to be in here, folks, but that's all right. Now we're, since you're doing so well, now you can read what we were intending to read. So this footnote relates to the fact that the latter teach the existence of Paramatsatya, the absolute truth. So from your footnote, go ahead.
Where the asterisk is?
Yeah.
Paramartha is self-consciousness. In Sanskrit, samvidana, or the self-analyzing reflection, from two words, parama, above everything, and artha, comprehension. Satya meaning absolute true being, or essence. In Tibetan, Paramartha Satya is Dandampidenpa, the opposite of this absolute reality, or actuality, is Samvrit Satya, the relative truth only. Samvriti meaning false conception, and being the origin of illusion, Maya. In Tibetan, Kunsabchi Denpa, illusion creating appearance.
Okay, so you start to suspect that English puts a real heavy hand on the translation of these terms, and that were you raised with as a Sanskrit scholar, but also as an occult scholar, that you would understand subtler meanings. But that's okay. This is where we are, and at this point, we just do the best we can with these. But just don't get bogged down with them. It's the concepts that ultimately matter. What I find here the most interesting is this idea of self-analyzing reflection, right? The ability to analyze one's reflection, because, or that is to say, from the existence of being the reflection, you're able to understand that that's in fact what you are. So it's a reflection. It's an awareness of the life principle within the reflection. So any thoughts about this?
But this is a reflection that is one with its source and not a second. One going to two and two reflecting on one. It's still one within one and still has a self-analyzing reflection, right? It's still unity.
Yeah,
it's not two.
At the state of Paramartha, yeah.
Yeah. So self-consciousness in a way that we don't usually use it, or use it in Bailey's work of reflecting on your higher self, or two looking back at one. It's unity as self-consciousness.
Yeah, it's that level. It's not, yeah.
Well,
yeah. Michael, do you have a thought on that?
A little bit. I think within unity, there is still a place for variety. In other words, for distinction. But within oneness, that place is taken. Mm-hmm. See, for me, when I look at this thing, I say, relative truth only. To me, this is how I see it. Relative truth only is possible on the lower 9 dimensions of cosmos. So, this is, from the old commentary and from DK, basically says, look, there are 10 dimensions of cosmos, and of course there's endless cosmoses. But let's just take our own, and all we're given on the maps are the lower 2 dimensions, basically. We're given the cosmic physical plane, and then we're given 7 cosmic planes, which taken together are the physical expression of a supercosmic system. So we're just given basically the lower 9, lower 10, okay? And to me, obviously you have to keep working on these things because they're so elusive, but to me, I don't see how anything but relative truth can pertain in, well, first I'll say on the lower 9 subplanes, lower 9 dimensions, and then I'm going to say something more radical, that relative truth is the only thing possible in any universe. Because to me, a universe is a severe limitation upon absolute infinity. And there, if we were to get into, what the absolute deity can reflect of itself, or see of itself, or self-observe of itself, then we're into unbounded completeness. And then we could not speak of relative truth only. In other words, in a post-universal world, a post-pralaic world, we could approximate something. I forget, I've lost my track here, but what is it called? What complete truth? What is it called? Something, absolute truth?
Well, yeah, the absolute. Yeah.
Yeah, or truth. And I'll tell you the truth. Okay, when you start talking about truth and any predicate whatsoever, any great concept whatsoever, it all comes to nothing in the face of the absolute, which is only what it is without any possible divided predicate.
Yeah.
It's not this, it's not that, it's not will, it's not love, it's not any specific thing.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that, that when you've got a universe, I'll sum it up, okay? When you've got a universe, you have relative truth only. Now, within the universe itself, it can be considered the highest truth that can be achieved. And that's fine, which to me is the complete self-perception of a universal logos. That to me is the highest truth. Call it the all-seeing eye, whatever you want to call it. But to get to absolute truth, it's just like you can't have that objectification you call the universe. It cannot be seen by any finite being. It can only be being, if you know what I mean. The minute you start seeing something, you've split it.
You're out of it.
But being it, whatever that is the top. And I'm working on this, and I hope to have it ready in several lives. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this paramata it's a conditional word. If you're looking at it at cosmic levels, like look at the definition, the breakdown here. Parama means above everything, and arta, comprehension. So ultimately, if you're looking at this at cosmic levels, as you were just describing, Michael, yes, it is in a sense during manifestation, it would be the ultimately would be the one logos reflecting on all that is, the source of all that is reflecting on all that is, not the absolute reflecting, because you're already in trouble. The absolute doesn't reflect. The absolute doesn't reflect. You're right. So you're not looking at that. To be paramartha is not to be the absolute. It's to be at a level where you can reflect on your reflection or the form aspect. And that was going to occur at many levels. Certainly any saint, any high arhat on earth is going to be a relative level of this, but we have to accept that. You can't always hold this, to the at these highest cosmic levels, or you have no way of having any experience, or delineating or describing experience on the earth.
Exactly. I think I won't say it's enough, but I would say that for people like ourselves, if we can look at any human being and say, that is I, then we've already come a long way. And if we can look at any perception whatsoever and say, that is I, it's even farther. So, you know, and that's an experience. That's something that you really get in your heart. You know, you in other words, we're up here on the abstract mind and we're theorizing and all the rest of it. But this kind of thing, you open your heart and you know through identification, that is I. Yeah. And that seems to be really, really important on a practical level. It would solve a lot of our love and conflict and frictional problems in the world, you know. Anyway.
Absolutely. Well, you go back to this idea of the oversoul, the underlying concept, and of the science of brotherhood, which is really what you're describing. You know, it's a realization of the energetic workings that animate the science of brotherhood. And, you know, at a certain level, you could say that is paramartha. You know, that self-analyzing reflection, you know.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Well, you got to make this stuff, you know, it's as heady as you can get, but you've got to make it, when I say you, I mean all of us, have to make it practical so that there's a change in our consciousness, in our ability, in our relatedness, and every good thing within us undergoes an elevation when the illusion, the great heresy of separateness is finally trounced, you know. We got to do that somehow.
Well, you know, you start by coming into some awareness on a conceptual level. That's the beginning. And it in itself, especially this material, it stretches you even to consider this conceptually. But that lays the foundation to invite the intuition in, which will then be the experience that it is describing. You know, some aspect, some, you know, faint hint of the experience it's describing. And, you know, otherwise it would serve no purpose, really, you know. So
good workout for the mental permanent atom. You know?
Yeah. You will see how much gets stored there for the next time around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see already that some of these terms are becoming part of our lexicon, like paramartha, right? It won't be a complete stranger next time we run across it. I doubt that Domdampaya Dinpa will become part of our lexicon, but paramartha is starting to sink in. Okay, let's go on. On to the last of this section A, this part of section A anyway. Could we get a reader, please, just for the highlight part at the bottom, starting with no arhat?
Lona, can you read that for us, please?
Here it is. No arhat. Just a moment, I need to get the picture. The paper size. No arhat. Oh, mendicants can reach absolute knowledge before he becomes one with the paranirvana. Parakalpita and paratantra are his two great enemies, aphorism of the Bodhisattvas. Parakalpita in Tibetan common tongue is error made by those unable to realize the emptiness and illusionary nature of all, who believe something to exist which does not. E.g., the non-ego, and paratantra is that which, whatever it is, which exists only through a dependent and or causal connection, and which has to disappear as soon as the cause from which it proceeds is removed. E.g., the light of the wick destroy or extinguish it, and light disappear. This comes from the Secret Doctrine, page 48.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this? More Sanskrit terms describing absolute knowledge in contradistinction to error and dependent reality. That's one interesting part of this description here. You know, this candle is kind of like the tree is pointed down with the roots in heaven. Well, very similarly, the wick is the source in this case, you know, and the light depends, the light being that temporary condition, whatever it is, depends on a more causal but still temporary source or cause, you know, the light of the wick. Okay, any thoughts about this before we move on? Okay, with this next paragraph, we finally get a respite from the Sanskrit. So this will be an easy read by comparison, and congratulations everybody for your efforts on this. Can we get a reader, please, for this? Still, we're on A, and therefore describing the alaya and paramartha aspects.
Can you read that for us, please, Helen?
Yes. Esoteric philosophy teaches that everything lives and is conscious, but not that all life and consciousness are similar to those of human or even animal beings. Life we look upon as the one form of existence, manifesting in what is called matter, or as in man, what incorrectly separating them we name spirit, soul, and matter. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence, and soul is the vehicle on a higher plane for the manifestation of spirit. And these three are a trinity synthesized by life, which pervades them all.
Okay, thoughts or questions? With this reading, we have stumbled on what is arguably the most famous statement in the entire Secret Doctrine. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence, and soul is the vehicle on a higher plane for the manifestation of spirit. And these three are a trinity synthesized by life, which pervades them all. DK quotes this several times, and even uses it in the dedication for the beginning of his 5 volumes set on the 7 rays. So obviously he held it in highest regards. In fact, let's take a look at some of DK's quotes. Could we get a reader for for this quote?
Okay, I'm going to go to Michael, and Michael has a question too, so go ahead, you're self-muted, Michael.
Yeah, when we start talking about matter, as we are living in the physical world, there's the substance, the matter of our physical bodies, and then we get into the matter of our emotional nature, and then the matter of our mental nature, and that rises, if you will, in degrees of subtlety. But then there's these things going on between correspondences between the etheric subplanes of the dense physical plane and the etheric planes of the cosmic physical plane. But even when we're talking about physical, emotional, and mental, it kind of begs a question about what type of matter might be on the cosmic mental plane, the cosmic emotional plane. And are those planes above the cosmic mental, perhaps some etheric things going on there as well?
Well, that's a matter of speculation, I would say. Bad joke. Let's see. What is it? 7th initiates start to have some awareness of the cosmic astral plane. So, the nature of the etheric levels of the cosmic planes is strictly available to us only through as above, so below, you know. And the plane that we are familiar with, just in some very limited part, is in itself the cosmic physical plane, which would be, from the cosmic perspective, entirely material, quote unquote, right? And that houses our monads, you know, and the monadic vehicles, and that's still considered physical reality from the cosmic perspective. So I think this concept of matter and substance versus quote unquote spirit is a continuous process until that last and final reabsorption. And you always have the material counterpart to that which lies above, and that never, in a sense, goes away, right? Even if, for instance, you were describing cosmic mental planes. It is, well, from our point of view, you know, I mean, if you're grappling with higher mental, from the cosmic physical point of view experience, and you're trying to get any sense of the cosmic mental plane, you know, if you're talking about solar logoic beingness, you know, the solar logos is said to have his being on the cosmic mental plane. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael. And so that, well, there you have it.
Well, it's a continuum of relativity.
Yeah, that's right. A relative continuum, you could say.
You know, boy, some of the big questions are being asked here tonight and being brought up. But, you know, in the Kabbalah, the basic thing there, a very simple sentence, that all matter is light. And, you know, is identified in a way with the emergence of the Son, when I say S-O-N, from the Father. So if we wanted to get into the Kabbalah, we would search that out. We don't know the structure of light. We're only now beginning to grasp a little bit of what that is when we study such things as photons, and, you know, on our own etheric level. But it goes much, much higher than that. And I've had for a long time, a kind of let me call it a psycho-spiritual idea of what matter is. And I'll just say it in a simple sentence, and you know, just kind of leave it. But for me, matter is the self-perception of the absolute deity. Now, I know, you know, there's a lot to think about there, but basically, until consciousness arises, and there's a question about order and whether it all happens at once, or Trinity at once, or sequentially, there is no matter. Matter is the self-perception of the very highest articulatable being. And so basically what I'm saying here is that we're not talking about the absolute exactly, we're talking about that which arose in some mysterious way from the absolute, and we call it the absolute deity. And that absolute deity is all in all when there is no universe. And when the absolute deity begins to self-observe, matter is created and then objectified and sent out into finiteness as a universe. Now, I know, you know, it's a lot of different language and all that, but it seems to me that matter and self-perception are inseparable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's also allows for the path of becoming, because it's through response to the patterns, which creates conditioning within substance, that allows that substance to align more with the life which animates it. And that's, you know, as we read before in that third postulate, that this is true of an atom of substance and a solar logos, right? It's this continuous process of conditioning substance in order that it can then respond. And in that process, the lesser lives within, the enclosing consciousness, and this is an infinite progression, but, let's just start with the cells in your own body. You are the logos of those cells, and through your response to your soul, you are conditioning the cells in your body so that they can make that the next step towards self-consciousness, which is exemplified by the human being. That's a way of parsing out what DK says in that that third postulate, right? But it doesn't just stop there. You could see, one of the great statements is that we are cells in the body of the planetary logos, and so you could say that. But the game now, the goal now is group consciousness, right? So through participation in solar connection, you are within the consciousness of the planetary logos. Its purpose, which is participation in God consciousness, is stimulating the cells in its body to become group conscious. There's so many ways of looking at this. So that activity of the planetary logos towards God consciousness moves us, all the cells that are the human beings, towards group consciousness, just as, one might say, our process of attempting to achieve group consciousness moves all the cells in our body towards self-awareness or self-consciousness, right? And this is, you could say, one of the great purposes of substance, is this way of affecting those lesser beings that always make up a part of the greater whole.
Makes sense, Francis.
It's all a continuous resolving of apparent dualities, and when we look or think of the absolute, even spirit and matter is a duality that is emanated, and it's an illusion. It's real to us, but it's an illusion. Yeah.
So, Michael, would you read this?
Sure. The outstanding characteristic of spirit or energy is the life principle, that mysterious something which causes all things to be and to persist. The outstanding characteristic of the soul, or of force, is light. It brings into visibility that which exists. The outstanding characteristic of living matter is that which substands, or is found back of the objective body, and provides the true form. It should be remembered here that the basis of all occult teaching and of all phenomena is to be found in the Word. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence, and soul is the vehicle on a higher turn of the spiral for the manifestation of spirit.
Thank you.
Amazing. Francis, can I say one thing? The images you have here, as I understand it, I don't know where you got them, but these are the images that DK used to train the intuition in his glamour group.
Yeah, and the name of the artist is escaping me, which was really unforgivable. I should have this name down. yeah, they were available at that time. There's 30 or 40 of these, and they're just wonderful. I've used some of them before, but yeah, exactly. So you can see that this is completely relevant to what's being said here. You know, this interlinking of spirit and substance, and then the light, which is indicated by the radiant, you know, gray and white lines coming out. Yeah, sometimes it speaks to another part of us, you know. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that. I did not realize.
Yeah, I had huge copies of these.
Oh, you did?
I did huge copies.
Wow.
And they came from the DK group.
Mm.
And they are 30 years now undetected. They are somewhere. I hope they didn't vaporize. I hope they weren't aports, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, for the next webinar, I'll pull the name up of the artist, because we really should know that name.
Excellent.
There's a number of wonderful pieces by this artist. Okay, so we have here.
We had a couple of hands. Tuia had her hand up, and now it's gone down. Did you want to say something, Tuia?
Oh, yes, I was thinking earlier. I don't know, is it any more appropriate? But when you were talking about the very abstractly about these huge vistas, I was thinking about the Pisces and the symbolism of Pisces, and the Sutratma, which is connecting them. Like we can think about this symbolism in so many levels, from the matter point of view towards the personality, and then the personality to soul to monad. And then I was just picking up from the Pisces full moon about what DK says, that is coming from esoteric astrology from page, I think, 115. There is a dual renunciation referred to in these keywords. For first of all, the soul renounces the life and light of the monad, its source symbolized by the words the Father's home, and descends into the ocean of matter. Then, reversing itself, the soul renounces the life of form, the personality center. The soul detaches itself in consciousness from the monad, the one, and functions from its own center, making its own new and material attachments. Then, upon the reversal of the wheel, it proceeds to detach itself from the personality and reattach itself in consciousness to the one who sent it forth. Such is the climaxing story of Pisces. The lords of will and sacrifice come down into manifestation, sacrificing their high position and opportunities upon the higher planes of manifestation. So somehow, in that, although it continued of manifestation, in order to redeem matter and raise the lives by which it is informed, the lower creative hierarchies, to the status of themselves insofar as they constitute the fourth creative hierarchy. This is the subjective purpose underlying the sacrifice of these divine lives. So anyway, I was just thinking about that somehow Pisces is telling this whole thing what we were talking about.
It sure is, yeah. It's incredibly relative, you know. And the sacrificial nature of it, you know, the two acquiescences of the soul, you know, that first one, which is, you know, submergence into the material aspect, in order to animate and eventually return to the Father's house, right? But yeah, the Capricorn keywords, you know, really come in there, you know, that
also. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, right. You know, I mean, they're all relevant, but you're right. This linkage between between the two fish is really described in this. I mean, it's even, you can see it in this artwork. You know, it's it could be seen as another way of looking at Pisces. You know, this artwork, a more esoteric version. Yeah.
Right, and this secret I have been so many times contemplated about that in Capricorn, that I lost my enlightened supernal, and then that light I turned my back, and the symbolism of Capricorn has this fish tail, what they try to take away in modern illustrations. But I think it should be kept, because there are this very deep connection between the Pisces and Capricorn. And then the second decanate behind it is the Dolphinus, which is then again a fish. Or I don't know, do we count dolphins as or dolphins as fish? But anyway, they are swimming in.
They're sea dwellers. So yeah, the metaphor is intact, I think. You know, I don't, you know, they're not fish, they're mammals, but I don't think we're going to let a little bit of science get in our way of a good metaphor here, you know.
Yeah. But anyway, it was this, when one abstracts things and tries to see, but it is important for us, because it is giving the room for intuition. And then it just brought me about this Pisces, how incredible sign it is, telling about everything for us about our journey.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Yeah, the sacrificial nature of the process is, you know, especially underscored in Pisces and its planetary rulerships. Yeah.
And DK says that this part of us to understand divine life and the divine purpose, we have not developed that faculties yet in humanity, so we cannot really grasp why it has to be so incredible mystery that the one is descending itself into the matter, into the self-forgetfulness, and why all this is happening, this great mystery.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of the great philosophical questions, you know, that very question, you know, why?
Yeah.
Why the descent? And the answer that makes sense to me is the vivification of the lesser lives. That through that descent, you know, if you know, the planetary logos just, you know, went about, I mean, you can't even imagine what the alternative would be, but because at that point there is no lesser self to turn to, you know, but it's just inherent. It's really only at this level of personality separative division that we can imagine. But you know what? The very fact of existing as human beings has this elixir effect on the lesser beings that make up ourselves, our bodies, and you know, this would be true also of our etheric, astral, and mental bodies. The cells in those forms are all vivified by the indwelling jiva, whose source is the soul. And you know, I think that's the best answer. At least that's the best answer I've found as to why this happens, you know.
But why in the first place there ever came into being the lesser lives?
The single biggest question of all: why move out of the absolute? You're already in a state of the day be with us, where all is partaking of the one. So why move from that into the Anvachara, you know? And it's above my pay grade, you know? That's all I can say.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Well,
Okay.
let's just...
We have,
Go ahead.
Francis has had his hand up for a while, so you want to go ahead?
Yes,
There you go. Go ahead, Francis.
I thought as we're talking about this subject, a couple things. I'm reminded of the DK tests with spiritualizing matter. And as I wonder, I believe I remember that they relate to the lower triad, the personality, mental, emotional, and etheric physical and dense physical. I think he had said that dense physical is not a true principle.
Right.
We're speaking here of spiritualizing. We're speaking of our individual selves to group connection and awareness. And I'm just wondering how that relates to spiritualizing the densest matter, perhaps. And just one other thought, as we was just speaking, about why would we leave the absolute? I remember once the guru was asked that, a similar question, and the guru responded, I separated myself so that I may love myself. Love being the key focus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that characterizes the energy of the path of return right there. You know, love is that which reunites. You know, so, but I love that quote. You know, it's nothing like a good guru quote. You know, I separated myself so that I could love myself. You know, yeah, I think you know, it's just that there. If you think of, there is no matter. Well, I could just stop there. There really is just energy formation, energy configuration, right? And that can be conditioned by a pattern, and that pattern is part of the plan. And so the responsiveness of that is heightened through these progressive envelopes, such as your own self, you know, and all the cells in your body, and then the ashram to which you belong, right? And each of those groups heightens the process of response to the pattern. And that pattern is the purpose is animated by, according to ray configuration, etc., the plan, right? It's animated by ultimately the plan of the planetary logos, right? Is the authority, well, even more ultimately by the plan of the solar logos. But so, you know, it's even that single cell can be quickened towards its next level of becoming, and is in fact, you know. So it's, to me, that really is the best answer for, you know, at least once the Manvatara is the reason for this process of turning your back on the light, you know, of the Father, which is a metaphor for this immersion into a condition of a more material condition, right? Such as souls do, right? That's the first acquiescence of the soul. The soul goes, okay, you know, it agrees, you know, like those who individualized in Lemurian times, you know, some soul met you at the threshold and agreed or acquiesced to immerse itself in this form for some, you know, many hundreds of thousands of lifetimes to come to a point to where it could then reverse. And the acquiescence comes from the indwelling jiva who acquiesces to the will of the soul. Right, so it's that double acquiescence, right? So, any other thoughts on this before we move to the next? We're not going far, folks. Just moving to the next DK quote on that includes the this great quote from the Secret Doctrine. Let me see here what I have. Yeah, so we are also in Light of the Soul. We have this quote. Could we get a reader for this? This has to do with the word.
Okay. Chris, can you read that for us, please? I guess not. All right. Let's go. Helen, can you read that for us, please?
It might be added that this great word, Om, when meditated upon, gives the clue to the true esoteric meaning of the words in the Secret Doctrine by H.P.B. Life we look upon as the one form of existence manifesting in what we call matter, or what, incorrectly separating them, we name spirit, soul, and matter in man. Matter is the vehicle for the manifestation of soul on this plane of existence, and soul is the vehicle on a higher plane for the manifestation of spirit. And these three are a trinity synthesized by life, which pervades them all. Through the sounding of the word and through reflection upon its meaning, the way is found.
Thank you. Okay, so any thoughts or questions about this? Do we have a different angle here, right? Okay. That's going to do it for today, folks. That takes us on to the next section of the commentary, and I think we'll pull the plug here. It's a real pleasure for me. It's actually a great privilege to be with you and to have this discussion. So I thank you all for attending, and we'll keep on keeping on. It's going to get busy here for those who are preparing for the conference, but I'm trying to keep this, not cancel any webinars, to keep this going straight through. I think we can do it with the third week idea. You know, we meet. And what is our next date? BL, do you have that in front of you?
Yes. Give me just a second here. Okay, March. It's going to be the 24th of March.
Okay, is that third week or fourth? That sounds like fourth week.
It's the fourth week.
Yeah. So once again, we're breaking the rule, which is. This is the third month that we're breaking that rule, but that's all right. We'll meet again on the 24th.
I think it still has to do with the, we're encroaching on the full moon festivities. So yeah.
Yeah, we just work around it. It's
Francis.
Yeah.
Francis, one thing by breaking the rule, you've hit a good day because that day is Moria Remembrance Day.
Oh, how fantastic.
Said, if you want to remember me on March 24th. So there you go.
That's great. Good. All right, folks. Until next time, blessings on all of you. And thanks for participating. And I'll see you on March 24th.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.